Hi, everyone. So if you've tuned in before, you probably took one look at my face and went, that's not Ian. That's true. This is not Ian. My name is Mars. My pronouns are it, they, he in that preferential order. I'm the Prevention Project Coordinator at the Southwest Center, although I think that is the official title. My favorite unofficial title so far has been Condom Master Mars. So I help with the Nice Package initiative that we run out of Southwest Center. Real quick, before we get started, I just want to start with some housekeeping items. During the current pandemic, we at Southwest Center, we're doing our best to move our services online. So currently, we are offering telemedicine visits for HRT and other primary care needs, therapy over video chat support groups, online group empowerment sessions, and we've started doing teletesting. So you go through the process, they send you a kit, and you actually get to do the test with someone on a video chat with you, helping you through the test. And I know that those tests can be nerve-wracking. So I so love that Southwest Center has started doing this, where you can actually be there with someone, even though we're doing it, obviously, distanced. Also, given especially that I'm here, we offer free condoms delivered to your door. Go to nicepackage.org. Yeah, it's easy. We have 17 condoms on there and 10 variety packs. So hopefully there is something for everyone on there. And if not, there is contact info on there to get a hold of me. I will probably be the person who replies to that email. So there are no wrong questions. We will do our best to answer whatever y'all ask. I'm not a lawyer or a doctor or a navigator. This is not legal or medical advice, and I'm not Ian. So as awesome as he is, we really wish he could have been here tonight. Just he wasn't able to make it. They asked me to step in. So I have actually, well, this is a great way to transition to who our guest is tonight. We are having a guest tonight. Her name is Kendra. She's the president of Transspectrum Arizona, which is actually the organization where I have been I've been helping them run the gender nonconforming group for a while. So yeah, she's going to be coming in and we're going to be talking about why it's important to find your community. So let's get started. And we will be sitting here looking at the comments, but also just know that sometimes it's hard to keep up with them, so we will be trying to keep up with them, and we are looking forward to all of your questions. How are you doing today, Kendra?
I'm good.
Yay! So why don't you start by telling us what Transspectrum is doing during COVID and how the group is handling that?
So unfortunately, up until recently, we weren't doing anything. Because of COVID, we weren't meeting because we have so many people who are immunely compromised in our community that we as a board decided it was in the best interest of our community to not meet and not get together. We did check out we were checking into some virtual stuff, and we weren't real happy with some of the security features that were available to us at the time. So we decided not to move forward with that. Since a lot of the virtual programs have now improved their security measures, we're actually getting ready to start our virtual meetings here in August. It'll be our standard meeting times, so it'll be the Tuesday evenings from 6:30 to 8. And then we have our Saturday meetings. We'll start at about 11 o'clock, and they'll range for all the different groups like we normally stagger them in our normal Saturday meetings.
Fantastic. So I'm glad to hear that you sort of figured out how you're going to do that. Also, can I just say your makeup tonight is on point.
Thank you.
I am loving it.
So what we ended up doing is we are using Zoom, and we actually have multiple accounts set up. So we have different hosting for each specific group. That way there's a moderator set up for each group running that group. We're going to limit the group size to 15 people for the first month, just so we can get a feel, and we'll reach back out with our moderators and make sure that that's not too much, or vice versa. If we need to include more meetings, we're willing to do so. We're training new moderators to make sure that the community is getting the coverage that they need.
Okay. Well, that is really exciting. I'm glad to hear that you guys are working on adjusting as necessary through this, because I think I don't think anyone was prepared for this.
Excuse me.
So I see a question in the comments. Stephen says, I've heard some people use the word folks with an X instead of folks. Can you explain why I'm seeing this term more?
Do you want to handle that? Or do you want me to?
All you.
So really, it's a gender neutral term, and it's actually that way you're not going guys, gals during a conversation. Folks is a gender neutral term, and it's actually for people like Mars who are gender nonconforming who actually prefer that term.
And when it's spelled with an X, it's specifically intended to include people of all sorts of genders, instead of a more general term that may not say that they are thinking of us particularly. So I see Tracy and Sherry said hello. Hi. Hi, Ian. We miss you. Yeah. So without seeing a whole lot of questions currently coming in, and please know, you guys, that the questions are a little bit delayed on our side. So if you've asked something and we haven't seen it yet, I'm sorry. And we will see it as soon as they come in. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about why Transspectrum exists and about the community that's formed there?
Do you want a history lesson, or do you just want to why we do it?
A bit of both, up to you.
Okay, so Transspectrum originally was a branch out of PFLAG. It started out of PFLAG meetings. So technically, PFLAG is a parent organization for us. I mean, we did originally start through them. We realized there was a need within the trans community for not just the trans individual, but for also the people that support that trans individual. We call them SOFAs, significant others, friends, family, and allies. We actually have 2 SOFA meetings during our meeting sessions, a romantic partner and a non-romantic partner. The reason we set these up is because it's not just that your transition, it's actually everyone around you's transition as well. Part of that being, you've had your entire life to figure out who you are. The people around you, really, if they weren't paying attention, or maybe they didn't pick up on the clues you thought you were dropping, this is completely blindsiding them.
That makes sense. I do see a question in here that says, why is it important for trans folks to find other trans folks?
The biggest sense of community that you can have is when you find someone who's going through something that you've got that's similar that you've gone through. It's really important. I know for me personally, and speaking from personal experience, I went 38 years before transitioning, and while I could find some people on the online community, I didn't think anyone had ever had any type of experience like I had. And once I met people and started frequenting Transspectrum and other transgender organizations, I was like, wow, there's very common themes. Everyone's transition is unique in their own, but there's some very common themes that take place within transition.
Makes sense.
So
would you say that it is useful because we can sort of help bolster each other and?
Oh, definitely help lift each other up, help when someone's down, praise someone for things that are going good in their lives. I mean, just anything you can experience within the community is really where finding people who have experienced like you is without a doubt the best thing you can possibly do. Ian just asked what's the best part of the trans community. Beat ya. So Carla asked, they're scared someone will out them, and what do you do to make sure you're not outed by other members? At Transspectrum, the Transspectrum meetings are private, and we actually make a point of announcing that throughout the meetings and before the meetings. There's what happens in the meeting stays within the meeting. It's a very, very Vegas motif at that point. We make a point of and giving examples of where it's not okay to out somebody, where it's not okay to find someone in the grocery store and say, "Hey, I remember you at the Transspectrum meeting." That's not okay, and people are reprimanded. And actually, we've had people who have had to ask people to leave the meetings and not be part of them before that kind of reason. We take it very seriously.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm not seeing another question come in quite yet, but having been part of the meetings before, I know that there are peer-to-peer support groups that you run.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and that process?
Yeah, so no matter what you are when you start the day and when you walk as soon as you hit that door frame, you're no longer a doctor, you're no longer a therapist, a professional, any type of medical professional, any type of professional who works within the community. We're all peers at that point. And it's one of the things we stress when we're actually talking at the beginning of our meeting, and as we're in the circle announcing who we are and talking about ourselves, it's one of the things that we make sure that we bring up, because it's important to not solicit medical advice from other people. If you happen to, someone happens to mention they're a doctor or a therapist, you can have a private conversation with them outside of the meeting, but it's not something we encourage during the meeting.
I see a question. My parents have become very aware of trans and non-binary issues recently. How, as a person not of trans experience, can I help them to be better allies?
Have them come to the soft meetings. I mean, it's really the best advice I can give on that. There are parents, family, people who are in relationships with transgender individuals, and those are broken into 2 different meetings. So, because sometimes there's conversations that need to take place between people who are in relationship with trans individuals that maybe a parent doesn't want to hear, or vice versa. And so we made sure to separate those 2 meetings, and those meetings, that's the best way to get information about trans individuals, because these are people who've experienced this situation and can help you along in that way.
I just have a question, because I know that right now they could technically maybe join. I don't know if they could join in on that if they're out of state. Yeah, but what about the parents who are out of state? Do you have other resources that you might be able to recommend to them?
So we have all the groups that I've mentioned actually have secret Facebook pages. And so they're all moderated by people who are actually part of that community, and they make sure that they police it and make sure it's, basically the same rules that I mentioned that apply at our meetings take place on our social media pages as well. And those are secret pages, so it's not something you're going to be able to see across your feed if you're trying to keep stealth and you're trying to make sure that, people don't know everything that's going on in your life.
Okay. So how is Transspectrum handling those needing services that are immunocompromised in these times? It can be lonely out there. I assumed it was Transspectrum. I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, I'm going so up until this point, we were really just trying to make sure we man the phones by saying man the phones. It's literally me answering my cell phone. And trying to make sure that I contact people like Eion, or I contact other people in the community who are doing the work, who are actually helping people and making sure that they're getting the information that they need. Now that we are actually starting our virtual meetings, we'll be able to have a little bit more of what Transspectrum is known for and what we've done in the past, but now virtually. And this strap is driving me nuts.
Oh, goodness. Do y'all have any resources for trans persons who are parents, like a support group for kids?
So we do not. AZ Typo would be the organization I would reach out to for that. It's aztypo.org, and they were actually originally formed out of Transspectrum, and it was a need that we couldn't fulfill for legality reasons and for other reasons that take place within Transspectrum. So they had their own kid. It's a parent group Arizona Trans Youth Parent Organization.
Okay. If someone is interested in helping, what can they do?
Reach out to me. The number on the website is there. You reach out to the website and send an email to the info@tsaz.org. And you can send it or directly to me at kendra@tsaz.org. I'm really the point of contact at this point. So anything that goes through Transspectrum and goes through the board comes through me.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to kind of throw you a little bit of a curveball as we wait for a second. But I happen to know that you are involved in a lot of things other than Transspectrum. A lot of parts of the trans community. Oh, I do. You know, I may have met you before this or something. It's fine. Why don't you talk to me about a little bit about your involvement outside of Transspectrum, but in the trans community and some things you've been doing?
To what aspect?
Up to you.
I think we put on the flyer on the information that I am a drag performer, and I'm currently Miss Cruisin' 7th, which is a local bar here in the Valley. They're incredibly open to the trans community as a whole and everyone in the LGBT community. But I'm currently the reigning Miss C7. I competed for the Phoenix Pride pageant this year. So this is my first year competing in the pageant. It was my first year actually doing drag. I had my 1-year anniversary in May. So were you talking about another part of the community, Mars?
I mean, you're also involved in Trans Day of Remembrance and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it was completely up to you what you wanted to say to that.
So yes, I do help organize Transgender Day of Remembrance, and actually every trans holiday that we have here, that we do celebrate here in the Valley, I try to make sure that I help facilitate that and at least get the information out. If I'm not integral in setting it up, I'm right there trying to make sure the information is disseminated properly. The other thing I'm part of is I'm maybe part of the leather community, so.
We have a question that says, can you go more into details about what being transgender means, what that looks like, and what you experience?
More into detail about what being transgender means. The generic answer is my mind didn't match up to what my body was born as. That means I always identified as a woman and I have male parts. And so it caused me gender dysphoria, which is the technical term for the process. Not all transgender people experience dysphoria. I personally did. There's a wide range of the transgender experience, and transgender is an umbrella term that covers anyone who doesn't basically identify as the body that they were born into. What else was the question?
What does that look like at what you experience?
What does it look like? I guess we can put a picture of Ken up if you want.
I'll admit I'm real against putting up like old photos of people unless it's like to make a point. But it's a personal thing. Like if you want to, up to you.
No, it's fine. So what it looks like is I hated myself, and I really didn't enjoy the person that I looked at in the mirror every day, and to the point where I personally became suicidal about it. And I really got to the point where it was going to be, he was dying one way or the other. And I think I chose the healthier choice.
That makes sense. I see a question saying, can anyone go to Transspectrum if they're not sure about their gender?
Definitely. And so really, because we break the groups down on Saturdays, we break them down into gender specific, it becomes, you're kind of limited to what group you're going into. I recommend personally going into the gender nonconforming group, if you're questioning, because literally it's a wealth of knowledge, and actually, and all the groups are, but the gender nonconforming group is going to give you more of an open environment to be able to talk about things. Also, our Tuesday meetings are open format, and so those ones tend to be better for someone who's questioning things at this point.
And I will totally talk a little bit about that gender nonconforming group since I've spent a whole lot of time in there. It's fabulous. I'm so thankful that Trans Spectrum has this group. I don't know what I would have done if this didn't exist. And just to talk a little bit about my own experience in getting there, and it's going to be a little emotional, but I think that people can usually can sort of relate to this, is just I didn't have anyone in my life that understood what it was like to be trans. I had super supportive partners and family, but I didn't have anyone who really knew what it was like. So I had a really bad dysphoric week. Just a series of really awful things happened that I don't want to get too deep into. But let's put it this way. I came home from the bar, cried for 3 hours straight. Somewhere around hour 2, I looked up non-binary support groups and found Trans Spectrum, and was so terrified going to the group. Like, Kendra, I know you've heard this story before.
I know.
Terrified. And I was welcomed in with such open arms, and the conversations have helped me so much in my own personal gender journey that I now look back on it and I'm like, what was I doing trying to go through this on my own? Like,
when Ian asked if I would do this, I was like, yeah, for sure, because I remember how nervous and scared I was going into my first meeting and not knowing what to expect, and thinking, my experience with transgender people was what I saw online, or literally what I saw on like Jerry Springer, and like neither one of those really fit with the person that I identified as. So I mean, I was really freaked out, and so going in there, I was like, oh, these are just normal people who were living the same kind of life that I am.
Looking through. I have clients.
Andrew, it's SOFFA is the software group, and if you message me or my wife, Catherine Lizarago, she can get you added to that.
And then I see another question. I have clients that need almost mentoring in a way. Can they reach out to Trans Spectrum for help in finding support?
Okay, so this is something that it's just barely starting to take off, and it's an organization that I'm going to be starting shortly. It's a branch off of Trans Spectrum. And it's definitely something I'm going to be reaching out to trans people in the community to do a mentorship program, just for this very reason. I've definitely heard this, and it's definitely something that is a hole that we are not filling, and so I want to make sure that hole does get filled. So Eddie, yes, it's something to look forward to, and expect a message from me, because I'm going to be counting on you to help with it. So
fantastic. Do you help with any grants like the one with Ed Broadway?
I helped create it. Eddie came to me when he was originally coming up with the idea, and we helped branch the idea out, and I make sure they get the information out to the community as much as I possibly can. So. And I actually make sure I bring information about some of the national grants that are out there, and make sure that I get that out to the community as well. So Eddie's isn't the only grant. Eddie's just the only grant here in Arizona.
I do see a comment, well, it's sort of a series of comments, where I saw one that said the gender nonconforming group is fabulous, and the same person later added that they sat outside for 3 weeks before going into the non-binary group. So I just want to say, one of the parts I left out of my story was the part where my first day going to the meeting, first of all, it took me 3 weeks to even get up the nerve to actually go to the meeting after I found it. And then the first day I went, they only had the gender nonconforming group once instead of 2 full hours. It was just 1 full hour. And I literally cried in my car for an hour out of nervousness before going into the group. So I promise you, you are not alone. This is normal to be super nervous when you're looking for community. And so I just want to like emphasize again, like, you're not alone and we're here, and like this is a group that's very close to my heart.
We try to, and honestly, we try to be. I mean, if we're not succeeding by helping out the people that are just coming in, then we're not doing what the organization is designed to do, and that's a failure on my part and every other board member's part at that point.
So I see a question. Are you looking to partner with any other organizations?
Yes, I'm going to contact you too, Eion. I'll give you a little bit of a backstory on this. So obviously we've had a lot of downtime during COVID, and it's definitely something that I started to work on right before COVID, and it was going to be one of my projects that I worked on through my reign as Miss Cruz in 7th, kind of branching that and using the bridge to put the two together. Obviously, that being said, COVID kind of put a big barrier up for that for me, and I still haven't worked out all the details on how to make all of it work. And then I started a home business with a friend of mine, and so we've really been, the last month and a half, we've really been grinding away on that, and so that's kind of taken all my time at the moment.
That makes sense. Well, and I know that, well, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the leadership of Trans Spectrum, and like, do you get paid for doing this?
Oh no. I wish sometimes. I really do. It would make doing it a lot easier. Unfortunately, it is a volunteer position. I've held the term of president now for 4 years. This is my fourth year as president. I was vice president for 1 year before that, and it's a labor of love for everyone who's involved in the community, who is involved in Trans Spectrum. It's a labor of love, not just the board, but everyone who volunteers, all the facilitators, all the people who do all the work. I wouldn't be able to get up, to sit here and talk to you about it without people doing the work that they do.
It looks like you're looking at the next question. I do see a question. Do you have any literature recommendations to read more on trans and or non-binary topics?
The PFLAG book is really good. Our Trans Loved Ones it's a little bit outdated, but it's still some great information in there. And they update their website a lot more than they update the book itself. So if you go to their website, the information's there as well. Our website's a good place to go to get information. I mean, there's information there, and honestly, I think our secret pages are a great way to get information about transgender and non-binary issues. I mean, I'm a moderator on the non-binary page. That's the only group besides the feminine group that I'm actually a part of that isn't specific. So like, I'm not part of the trans-masculine group, and I'm not a part of the SOFA group. But I do help moderate the gender nonconforming group with permission from the community as a whole. If it was an issue, then I wouldn't moderate it, because obviously I want to give people their privacy and make sure that they have a safe place to talk. But because I go to so many gender nonconforming meetings, they've allowed me to be a moderator in that group. So.
I mean, we might like you or something, whatever. And I will say, for the Our Trans Loved Ones book, I have actually used it in, I'm going to school still, and I've actually used it in school papers. So it is a pretty decent resource. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about why we don't have more resources that you feel comfortable recommending off the top of your head?
A lot of it's outdated. A lot of it's bad, just blatantly bad information. And a lot of it's written out of a place where a lot of the terms are either offensive to people within the community or just blatantly wrong. And so that's my personal reason for not feeling comfortable with some of these resources. And the funding isn't there to actually put the new resources out there. I mean, our government isn't putting the money out to make sure these new resources are done properly. It's not that we don't have educated people who are willing to do the work, but they're just not willing to do the work for free.
Well, and I would add to that, just in addition to just outdated, just there isn't a whole lot anyway. Even if it wasn't outdated, there just is not a lot out there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you mentioned your drag. I have a personal question for you.
Okay.
Why did you decide to go into drag as a trans woman? I'm just curious. Not that you and I haven't talked about that a million times.
So partly because what drag means to the trans community. It was a safe haven for the trans community for a lot of years, and so part of that for me is giving back to that and recognizing where the strengths of the trans community come from, and then taking some of the power back within the drag community as a whole. I'm over 300 pounds. I'm 6 foot tall, and I'm coming into myself on the drag stage. I'm definitely not going to say I'm great at drag, but I'm coming into myself, and I'm able to do that because of love and support within the community as a whole and within my trans community. But I'm not going to say it. It's been easy. I mean, I have gotten backlash from the trans community and from people within the drag community. I mean, I'm a bit well endowed, and that that's not always looked upon well within the drag community, but within the trans community, it's finding I'm the misogyny that goes along with, or the perceived misogyny that goes along within the drag community, is from what they've seen on RuPaul's Drag Race or any other television. I'm not going to say Dragula because Dragula has been incredibly inclusive within their programming, but you don't see trans women on RuPaul's Drag Race unless they've gone through transition afterwards. There is no someone who's actively going through transition on the show. There's, because Ru's made comments where they've said, trans people don't belong in drag. So
that's a shame.
It is.
I'm seeing a question. What's one thing you would, and by the way, if questions slow down, I will be coming back to that topic. What's one thing you would want people to do to support you? It jumped. Trans spectrum and the trans community.
One thing I'd want people to do to support trans spectrum and the community?
To support you,
me personally?
Trans spectrum and the trans community. Yes, there are 3 questions here, and I'm going to hold you to that first one.
Okay, so me personally, honestly, support other trans people. I mean, that's why I do what I do. It's why I'm active and why I don't hide the fact that I'm trans. I could. I mean, at this point, I've been transitioning now for 5 years. I could easily go stealth and pretend that I'm not trans, and I don't. I make a point of not. I make a point of wearing it as a badge of honor, and answering those questions so the next transgender person doesn't have to. The what's in my pants? Am I considering the surgery? What was my name before? All those questions. I answer them so the next person doesn't. Okay,
thank you for that, because God, I hate it when people ask me those questions. I have people who I've known for years who I'm like, nope, I'm not answering the what was my name question. You know better than that.
And I make a point but I educate as well as when I'm doing it. Is I make a point of saying, I'm going to answer this question, but this isn't the proper way to ask someone. How would you like it if I asked you what was in your pants? That kind of thing. So what was the rest of it?
So how would you like people to support trans spectrum?
Show up. Whether you're trans or not, show up for the meetings and actually learn and be educated by the trans community as a whole. We're just people, and we're just trying to live our lives. So, I mean, if you can be there to help support us, that's the best thing you can do for the trans community.
And what's one thing you would want people to do to support the trans community?
As a whole, quit killing us.
Yeah. I feel that.
And especially quit killing, trans women of color. I mean, disproportionately, trans women of color are killed at a much higher rate than any other trans individual. But honestly, quit killing us. We're not hurting you. We're just living our lives.
Yeah. And it was posted to the comments 22 and counting this year.
Yeah, and we're just over halfway through the year.
Yep. Sounds tiring, doing so much great work. What do you do for self-care?
Drag is a big help. And like I said, I just started a business with a partner. I do a lot of woodworking. I enjoy it. I enjoy making things out of wood. I think part of the joy of it for me is being able to take something away and make something beautiful.
Okay, I'm super curious. What do you make?
So I started recently when I started drag, I realized you have to carry wigs around with you when you go in for these events. You have to carry your wigs and you have to take care of them. And dressing rooms are only so big, and you have to make sure that your wigs are properly taken care of. So I designed a wig frame. Was the first thing I did. Then, when I won Miss C7, I needed a way to transport my crown around without it getting damaged and without messing, anything happened to it. So I created a case for my crown. Now, because I'll segue into this because this actually comes into play. I am part of the leather and kink community, and so we're starting to make entry-level paddles and devices for the kink community.
Yes. Oh, exciting. You're going to have to show me pictures later.
Impact tools. My ma'am just reminded me they're called impact tools.
Oh, okay. I see a question.
And sensory tools too. So.
Oh, exciting. Finding your community can be so difficult. How can we empower others to reach out, take the leap, and take the leap like you did with drag? I'm hoping I got the emphasis right on the question. If I didn't, please let me know.
Finding the community can definitely be difficult. How do you empower people to take the leap?
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's something you have to find within yourself, and I floundered at it for about 3 years before I decided to actually do it. It's not that I wasn't following the drag community, and it wasn't not like I wasn't going around talking to people within the drag community. I just couldn't get my stupid ass up on stage. I had opportunities. It wasn't like people weren't offering me the opportunity to do so. I just couldn't make myself do it. I couldn't get over the hump. And I've been in bands my entire adult life. I played bass and sang in bands for my entire life. This was completely different though. This was an area I wasn't comfortable with. And I finally just got to where my desire, and like someone asked earlier what my outlets are, I needed it. My life was revolving around Transspectrum, and I love Transspectrum very much, and I wouldn't be here doing this if I didn't love Transspectrum. But I need a break occasionally. T-Door is draining. The other events, some of the other events that we do are draining, and they're so brutal to do. They're super important, and I'll never not do them, but they are so draining sometimes. And TSAZ as a whole sometimes can be draining. So I needed some way to make sure I was enjoying myself, and drag was it for me. I found something that I enjoyed doing.
Fantastic. How can I get involved, and when are the meetings and where? I know you covered it once, but will you just cover it one more time real quick?
Sure. Currently our meetings are virtually. If you watch our pages, our Transspectrum page and our Transspectrum website, I'll actually get that information out as soon as possible. And you lost me for a second.
It was real weird for a moment.
I think our producer's playing around with the boxes. So the virtual meetings will actually take place on Tuesday evenings, and then the second and fourth Saturday of every month. The Tuesday meetings will be open format, and then the Saturday meetings will be we'll break down into the masculine group, the feminine group, the gender nonconforming group, and the two SOFA groups, the romantic and non-romantic group.
Nice. How about this question? I feel like it's kind of a similar question to some of the other ones we've had. Can a cisgender person be an ally for the trans community, and how?
He definitely can be. My wife is cisgender, and she's actually the treasurer. Her role changes every year, so she's treasurer now. So she's treasurer for Transspectrum. Obviously, you don't have to be on the board to be an ally. But yes, my wife is cisgender and actually part of trans spectrum. And you can and honestly, supporting the trans community is just educating yourself and, being there for the trans community as a whole.
Well, I'd say, like, do you mind if I give a couple of concrete examples? I'd love for you to give a couple of concrete examples, but I know that, like, some concrete things that I try to train allies in is stuff like, if I'm in a situation where someone is misgendering me, please speak up on my behalf and correct them. That is something that a cisgender ally can do on my behalf.
But don't apologize. It bothers me when you're misgendering me. Just get over it. You made the mistake. We're fixing it. Move on.
Can you think of other, like I think that's a good one. Yeah, stop apologizing. Oh, that's a good comment I just saw. Say thank you, don't apologize.
Exactly.
What are some other things you can think of that might be some concrete things that they can do?
Some transgender people have a problem going to the restroom by themselves. Being an ally to go into the restroom with them is hugely important. Taking your transgender friends shopping, maybe in the store that they're comfortable shopping for, wherever they fall within the spectrum, taking them shopping for those clothing. And unfortunately, sometimes the masculine individuals have to shop in the children's section, and that becomes an issue for them, and it bothers them a great deal. So if you can help them shop for that stuff, by all means do so. Shoe sizes are.
Oh. Also, introducing trans women to the fact that women's pants do not all fit the same, I'm sure is an experience.
Oh man. So learning that your waist is actually, how you wear your pants as a woman is completely different from how you wear your pants as a man is a completely different experience. Teaching it, maybe having a session where you teach your trans masculine friend how to shave is something they've never had to do before.
Oh, yeah.
Getting a masculine haircut or a feminine haircut, or a haircut that's in between, something that doesn't show any gender, helping them do that kind of thing. Definitely a tailor. If you know a tailor who can make clothing,
and good stylists.
Oh
yes. Oh my God. And yeah, I think I've had cis friends help me through all of those things, and it has been some of the best blessings I've had. Like, I have one friend who, we'll go with cis assumed. He is cis assumed, and he does not correct people. Who took me clothes shopping for men's clothes early on. And it was amazing because he was able to be like, no, like tuck your shirt like this and that will help hide your chest better. And if you do this, it'll do this. And that kind of stuff helps so much when you don't know what to do. Like,
right. So being a plus size woman, there's certain things that you're supposed to do for clothing wise that to help accentuate or deaccentuate parts of your body. I'm not a good example of that because I don't really care, but it took a long time to get to where I didn't care. And I actually worked at Lane Bryant for a while, and so learning how to do blocking and learning how to properly wear a bra and the things that are important in that aspect, made a huge difference in my transition really early in it. Did you freeze, Mars?
I'm not sure if that was my internet or your internet. Are we back?
I think we're back.
Okay. Sorry to anyone if there was a little hiccup there. I'm seeing some wonderful people with some suggestions in here. Trans people who are cis assumed. This is a section where you can be an ally to your trans friends who are not cis assumed yet. That is a great point. Thank you so much. Someone mentioned that they are cis and you teach them so much about being a woman, Kendra. I believe that. I have to say, you give me so much to think about in terms of what being non-binary looks like. And you give me so much to You help remind me often in our conversations that it's okay for me to be feminine.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that a lot. And I think that's something that's important in community, is that, like, if I didn't have community, I wouldn't have people to bounce those thoughts and feelings off of.
It took me a long time to resolve the fact that I'm always going to enjoy football. It was a big part of my life. It's not it's not perceived as a feminine thing to enjoy, but I played football for a long time. And honestly, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't play football. Smashing people made me happy.
So is that why you're making impact toys? Smashing people makes you happy? So I see a question. What's the greatest strength of the trans community and the greatest weakness?
I would say the greatest strength is how we self-identify. I wish I could give that gift to all cis people. To come out as trans, you have to have an inner strength, and you have to be able to figure out who you are and work through that. That's the whole point of transition. And so if you're able to do that, minor life things don't stress me out as bad anymore. I really handle crises a lot better now. Greatest weakness, I would say, the misconception of who we are as a group, that we're out trying to lure everyone into who we are, trying to, have secret meetings and, secret handshakes and trying to get people to become trans and indoctrinate the youth and all the other stuff that goes along with it. I think that's the biggest weakness. So it's the miscommunication that goes along with people who think, they know what being trans is.
Yeah. I would say, to me, I'd say one of the things I feel is the greatest strength of the trans community is definitely anytime I'm having a really major problem, I now have a network I can reach out to. And I have other networks from other communities, but they don't always understand if I'm having some major dysphoria, or if someone, oh my God, I had someone who just wouldn't stop she-herring me the other day, and just being able to reach out to a friend and be like, why is someone using this pronoun for me? And vent that is it's comforting. And I can do that to my family, but it's not the same. There's not that same level of understanding.
Kathy is my biggest supporter. Kathy's my wife. For those who don't know, Kathy is my wife. We've been married 17 years. She's my biggest supporter, but she'll never understand what it's like for me to get misgendered in all the vote all the time. My man will never understand what it's like for me, how much it hurts me to have that happen. And the best way I can describe it is it's like a shit pile. And it just keeps getting added on top and thrown on top and thrown on top until finally it explodes or topples over. And that's the end of the day, when I don't have any spoons left and I don't have anything else to deal with. And that's because I've been misgendered multiple times throughout the day and I just can't handle it.
Mm-hmm. Oof, I know that one. I see a comment that says, I've learned so much from my/our community. I always say I would have been canceled a long time ago. That is, you know what? If this community did not so gently and lovingly correct me so often and teach me so many things, I agree. I'd be canceled. We'd be done. Someone mentioned you have such a great style, especially when you mix mask and femme. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I
like when you do your industrial looks.
My industrial looks? Okay. I really enjoy mixing the mask and femme looks. And I think that, I actually really used trans spectrum for a while after I went on testosterone. To give me a space where I felt comfortable. My goodness, the first day I showed up in a big red dress and red lipstick and red heels and this beard, I felt so fabulous. And Trans Spectrum was the place that I was like, oh, this is a safe space for me to do this. Thank you so much for providing that. What's the transgender handshake? I don't know this one.
If you don't know, you don't get to know.
I mean, so we make jokes about the transgender handshake, but I would say the transgender handshake in a sense is actually when you're meeting someone who you're not sure is trans yet and you start dropping the hints. And I think Eion and I talked about this when him and I did an episode together, but that like, oh yeah, puberty, it was so difficult. Like you just start like talking about that or other like little like just very weird trans things and you just see if they pick it up.
I like finding egglings. Like egglings is a term that I use for someone who had just coming out as trans or hasn't quite realized that they're trans. And being within the trans community and being part of it on a regular basis, you find like people who are you. You recognize people who are like you. Even if they haven't fully decided for themselves that they're transitioning. And so someone who's just coming out as trans, they have all these questions, and there's two types. So in my opinion, there's the ones that know everything. They've done all the research and they know everything that's possibly going on. They don't need any help. They're just here because their counselor told them they had to be here, and that's the only reason they're showing up. There's the other ones who don't know, who completely are blind to everything and want sponges and want to take everything in that they've got. And so I love both of them. Yeah. They both are valid and both definitely are fun to educate and enlighten and talk about the different things that we go through as trans individuals. So.
Mm-hmm. I see a question. I know we're getting a little short on time, but what would you say to a baby trans who feels that they're broken and don't get along with other trans people?
Ooh. I say to a baby trans who feels like they're broken and don't get along with other trans people. First off, I'd give them a hug, and try to, if obviously they're okay, make sure it's okay before I do so, because consent is everything. But if they will accept the hug, I'll gladly give them a hug and let them know that we all feel broken in some way. We all move past, have something about us that are broken. And that's kind of, honestly, that's kind of, for me, that's what being trans is. And I'll never feel like I've completely transitioned. That's my opinion. I mean, some people feel that once they've had surgeries or once they've reached a certain goal in their transition that they're done transitioning. Me personally, I feel like I'm going to transition for the rest of my life. And so I always feel like there's something broken inside of me. And so, and let them know that it's not the end of the world. You can get through it. It is possible to get through. Don't take the easy way out. Don't use a semicolon instead of a period or an exclamation point.
Love that. I actually also want to jump in on that just a little bit and just say, because usually when I experience that, it's someone who is gender nonconforming to some extent. Mm-hmm. And 90% of the time, when I sort of pry a little bit to find out, I find out that they've experienced some form of policing, some sort of, well, you can't really be trans because, or, well, all trans people experience dysphoria, or some form of that. Mm-hmm. And usually I just sort of go, okay, well, we're going to ignore the people who are being rude and mean, and we're going to bring you into the trans community with some people who are going to be really cool and accepting.
It's one of the things I try to I mention in the meetings is, and it's something I've said on multiple occasions, so I'm sorry for the profanity at this point, but you have to develop a don't give a fuck attitude. You really have to. You have to develop a thick skin as a trans individual, because the world isn't nice. The world isn't a nice place, and realize that there are people who do love you and will take care of you, but ultimately the world as a whole isn't a nice place, and so you have to develop a thick skin sometimes.
Yeah.
Someone's asking about my partner. So my partner is not trans. My partner I transitioned 11 years and
I think it's supposed to be asking how do they feel about you being trans, like when you first told them.
So I may give you a quick rundown of the story. So I am a night owl and my wife is a morning person, and so I woke her up at 4 a.m. and gave her probably 15 pages worth of information that I had printed out and put together over a month to inform her of what being trans is, and then talked about my experience about being trans. Because, yeah, and
It's a lot.
it was, and so we ended up talking for probably 4 or 5 hours that day. And by the end of the conversation, we had bagged up all of his clothing, and I was out full time from that point forward. That being said, my wife is my biggest supporter, and she is definitely, it's a love, hate relationship, I guess. We screw with each other all the time, and honestly, we have a great working relationship, and the best thing that takes place in that relationship is I can talk to her about anything, and that's really the fact that, you know, that's how our relationship continues to work.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on here. And I know that, like, we focus very much on trans spectrum because that's sort of your primary, the primary group that you lead in terms of that. But would you just talk a little bit about, like, the larger trans community and
As a whole?
Yeah, and how that's helped you? And
oh, definitely.
Yeah.
There's people throughout the years who have come in and gone out of my life, you know, throughout it, and they'll always be family, because we've connected on a level that not everyone has the ability to connect on. And so there's someone who maybe I haven't spoken to in 3 years, and they can send me a message, you know, right now, and I would fly to California if I had to, or, you know, New York, or wherever the case may be, across the world for them, because that's how important these people are to me. So I know it's reciprocated. I know if I was in crisis that it would come along the same way. So that's my experience within the trans community. That's what finding the community as a whole is so important, because you are a family. You know, my parents disowned me when I transitioned, and I have so many surrogate mothers and so many surrogate fathers that take care of me and make sure that I'm taken care of. And I had a mass found in my breast this year when I had my mammogram done, and there was a 20% chance that there was an issue with it. But I had every single one of them calling and messaging me, sending me cards, making sure I was okay. And I was freaked out about it. I'm not going to lie. I was freaked out about it. And I had so many people reaching out to me within the community and making sure I was okay, that it made it completely bearable. And even if I had to have them removed, or had to have something taken care of, you know, more drastic measures done, I know they would have been there for me. So
Yeah. That's so lovely. And I know that the community has given Kathy a lot of support too. So I just want to put it out there that, like, the support often is really there for both parties, or all parties involved, because when a trans person is transitioning, they're not the only ones transitioning. Like, family has to transition with you, and it's their own whole journey. And we just, yeah. So I just want to say thank you so much, Kendra, for sharing so much of your life.
Oh, it's an open book at this point.
Do you have any last words that you want to give everyone? We're going to be wrapping up here in a couple minutes.
I guess I would say definitely, you know, I reiterate the fact that, you know, stop killing trans people and support trans people in any way you possibly can. You know, we've given great examples during this presentation of how to do so, and you can get more information by just talking to trans people and actually having to sit down and having a conversation. Take someone to lunch, you know, go for coffee, you know, play a game, you know, Cards Against Humanity, or, you know, Unstable Unicorns, or video games of some sort or something. Find something that you have in common. We're just people. We're just trying to live our lives, and so continue to do so. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kendra. We really appreciated it. So just to remind everyone, Eion will normally be here on Ask a Navigator. We're expecting him to be back next week. We have telemedicine visits going on at the center, therapy over video chat support groups every week, online group empowerment sessions, teletesting, and you can go to nicepackage.org and order condoms. And just we really appreciate everyone tuning in and asking questions, so many great questions. And I hope you all have a great night.